All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Nukes of Hazard. I'm Sarah Bradley, joined by colleagues Mike Bradley's, Rob and Susanna Whelan. Hey, guys.
Hey, it's so good to see everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And today we've got a special guest, Yair Abramoff. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, super. So today we want to do some hot takes on some news that has just come out in the last several days, and then dive deeper here and talk a bit about what you're doing in the investment world and what trends and cool things you're seeing there and your journey to get there through the nuclear pipeline.
Perfect.
All right. So Rob, kicking it over to you. It sounds like
Yeah.
you've got lots of amazing news to share with us.
There's four news items, and number one is top priority. Yair's a new dad.
That's the best news. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, tell us about was it Levi or is it
That's exactly correct. Levi Jacob, he was born on March 5th. So new dad, first child, a son. I know in submarines, a lot of people have daughters generally. And so it's kind of a nice trend to get a first son was very exciting. I haven't slept this little since being on the submarine. Actually, I think it prepared me well. The sleepless nights, waking up at 2 a.m. for alarms or babies crying and everything.
Yeah.
So, but it's been a ton of fun being a new father. So very excited.
I really thought submarines trained me well for being a dad. Like seriously, like I mean, it's like it's like being in quals and have and standing watch back aft was like the father. So
Yeah. Also, like pretending like you know what you're doing, because like your eyes are on, if you're like taking that perk, people have to expect you to know what you're doing, but you definitely don't. Just like standing watch.
Yeah, Mike would just kick me out of bed and say, Sarah, you've got the con. I'm like, okay. All right, whatever that means. So yeah, I got you. But congrats, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
awesome, man? Congrats, beginning of new eras. All right, so Gallup, they do a poll every single year. What's your opinion of nuclear energy? This is United States. When we scroll up to the key one, overall, do you strongly favor, somewhat favor, or somewhat oppose or strongly oppose nuclear energy? And the green lines are strongly or somewhat favor. And right now that public support is at 61%. This is across party lines. It's trending up. That's 1% below the peak since they started doing this in I guess 94. And what's interesting to me is number one that Fukushima was in 2011, and so there was some drop here, but I would have expected it to like plummet. Something else is driving it. The other thing to point out is that at least Gallup says, well, hey, big tech, Google, Microsoft, Meta, they're partnering up with big banks. There's a lot of big news about giant deals in the pipeline, so maybe that's driving it. What do y'all think?
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, you can't open any news source any day without there being something that's at the very least in the three categories of AI, data center, or nuclear. And sometimes it's all three, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just, it's the natural gas powered data centers or something else. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and as I'm out touring around. So right now I'm in Hawaii here. I just met with some JOs here that don't know what they want to do when they grow up. And then I was in Guam before this doing the same thing. And I was at Yokosuka before this. Sarah didn't throw me out. Like this is part of what I do. And you could imagine the ones that are the closest to getting out are very aware of what's going on. The ones that are at PNO right now that came to just like figure out what they want to do for Shore Door and beyond, they have no idea. So that's kind of what I've been talking this all spring so far. Is this spring? Yeah,
And Mike, just to translate, junior officers in the nuclear pipeline who are transitioning to get out of the Navy in the near future.
Great. I also think a little bit, two things I think are big contributing factors to this. The first, no way to put it besides like a hot take a little bluntly, but I think the boomer population dying off is, I think, a big factor in a lot of the increase in the support. I think the boomers, they were around for a lot of, like, I think they never disassociated nuclear weapons from nuclear reactors. And so they never were able to think, hey, like Richard Nixon's plans of building 1,000 reactors in the US, kind of the fears of like dropping bombs to Atoll Islands and like the threat of Cold War. And like these kids, they were growing up as children, you know, hiding underneath desks in America. And I think they also kind of looked upon nuclear like unfavorably, and they also had like a lot of optimism about solar and I think wind, battery technology taking off and kind of replacing kind of some of the fossil fuels. But I think they were like the big anti-nuclear proponents, and slowly as they're dying off, I think you're seeing more and more gain just because of like the new generation has a lot of excitement about it and doesn't have those same kind of the same stigmatism that have to do with 3 Mile Island. I think you see it in Australia, where now they're like a lot of the young people, all the people in Australian nuclear, they're building a nuclear base there. They're like, they have all this legislation to prevent nuclear reactors there, but I think now they kind of understand the threat of being on islands and that they need nuclear. And I think part 2 of it is, I think I look back to like 2022 with Germany shutting down their nuclear reactors. And I think once the news came out that it was a lot of, there's some Russian influence there as well, where the Russians were really pushing Germany to, they had a bunch of agents like deep in like some of the Greenpeace movements and other very like green movements to kind of trick Germany into shutting the reactors down, which is then thus basically made Germany almost entirely reliant on Russian natural gas and other oil sources. And then as you can see, Russian oil prices and energy prices are just, or sorry, German energy prices are just like 4 to 5 times higher than France, and which is really driving profitability down of like BMW, Mercedes. They're selling the same amount of cars, but their profit margins are so much lower because it's such an energy intensive process. And so I think you're kind of seeing a little bit of like questioning of this green movement that was like causing a reactor shutdown. Like, hey, how organic is that really? Do they really care about the environment, or are there maybe some other things at play? And realizing that maybe this is the solution. And I think even some countries are starting to label nuclear as a green source finally. And I think that's kind of driving in our generation.
Or when it starts hitting the wallet, you start paying attention.
Yeah, I heard, okay, in England, energy costs are 4x what they are here. Maybe it's similar in Germany.
Germany's worse than England. Yeah, that's really bad.
Germany's worse. So I guess I didn't think that through. You're saying that maybe some of the public sentiment in Germany was pushed by Russian, basically, we want to sell you more gas, so you should really get rid of your nuclear.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's like reports of Russian agents inside the Greenpeace movement, like helping push, lobbying the legislation, which caused their shutdown. So I think that's also helping drive their reopening a little bit. It's just like the idea that like, oh, it's so embarrassing that we had like Russian influence into doing this. And now it's like kind of a 180 flip on it. Yeah.
What do you think that dip is in 2015?
I mean, to me, it's either like, okay, like the fallout from the pun of Fukushima was taking hold. But also, like Yair was saying, boomers had a fear, but boomers also made up most of the activists. So whenever I went to DC with General Electric and presented to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the activists were all gray haired, like, long gray ponytails kind of thing, super well prepared, but you never saw young activists. And now what I'm seeing in the industry is all the energy and enthusiasm are coming from young engineers. And so, yeah, maybe it is an age thing too. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I also think that once you put the numbers in front of people, once they realize how little energy a solar farm makes comparatively, or just a windmill. Like we have windmills all through we're on the Appalachian Ridge in Pennsylvania, and they're each, I think, like 2.5 megawatts, which is great. But like you need a lot of 2.5 megawatts to get to a gigawatt, And so that's kind of once you look at the numbers, like, holy crap, nuclear can get us there, kind of,
One more point on that. So speaking of renewables, so there's another poll that came out from Pew. It was recent in the last couple of months. Renewable support is way above this. It's like 78, 80%. And that's a reflection of all the investment that's happened in the credits and whatnot. But the problem with it is that it's not firm. So our listeners might hear the term firm baseload power. Firm means like always available. So it's, nuclear is always on. So renewables will always have that issue with them, that it's just not always on.
Rob, what do you think? Maybe next story about the executive order. So we're filming the week of what? This is the week of April 7th. Things might have changed by the time you listen to this, but let's talk about this executive order you found.
Yeah, this came out this morning and it's called Zero-Based Regulatory Budgeting to Unleash American Energy. And the idea is anything in the Code of Federal Regulations that apply to basically energy agencies, starting on September of this year, has a 1-year sunset clause. And every single word written will go away in 1 year, so September 2026, unless there's a good reason to keep it. So it's changed from like, maybe we should get rid of some of this stuff to like everything's going unless we need to keep it. And what it does not impact is, I think, existing permitting activities. It doesn't impact those, nor does it impact like the special regulations that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for example, have written, like kind of the local regulations. So the vast majority of stuff is going to stay. Now, I've got some thoughts on that, but that's kind of my read on this. And I also see it as like an opening salvo for deregulating energy.
So you're saying local regulations, but you sort of mean like sub-executive departments.
Yeah, thanks. So not local like state or city, but like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has their own set of rules that they operate by. I don't think this affects that. Did you see this year?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. What's your take on it? I mean, do you think so? This is 10 CFR, 10, Code of Federal Regulations, and there's a bunch of different parts to it. It doesn't affect anything else, does it?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, I think it's exciting just from the initial, like the idea is that it even says in there, but the federal regulations code is over like 200,000 pages. And some of these like individual codes are more than 60,000 pages. And it's kind of just gotten out of hand in terms they even list it. But a lot of these, like obviously some very important acts from like the 1950s, but then you really start to go a little bit crazy with like the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Acts and some of these like bird treaty acts of, whatever, and like coastal barrier. And that's where it really gets out of hand. And I think the NRC, where they really lost the cause was that when you talk to a lot of and I know you guys know very well, but when you talk to a lot of the regulatory bodies, the reactor safety or like kind of the safety parts of the code and kind of what drives like the NRC approval for different reactors actually doesn't take very long. And it's really just the environmental reviews and like making like one of the Facebook's is data center nuclear projects got canceled because like it was going to affect like the local honeybee population. I think that's where it's kind of trying to put that in effect. But I think the strategy of like, if you don't see the use of it in a year, get rid of it is kind of a good slow roll approach to try and get rid of a lot of these environmental or other things that really don't need to be involved. But I think my hot take in general with I think a lot of people use the NRC as a scapegoat for why we have only built 2 nuclear reactors in the last like 30-40 years here in the States. But I don't think the NRC really is like, I think it's like low natural gas, like a lot of offshore manufacturing, like not a lot of energy growth in a long time in the States that have kind of prevented us from building here. But I think getting rid of some of these kind of environmental regulations, and not you don't get rid of all of them, obviously, but there's just a lot you read a lot of crazy stories about protecting like a single bird or a bee or a fish. And just like, it's kind of, we're at an arms race now, an AI arms race. And like, we don't have time to protect like the silverfish in California. Like we have to build. And the amount of time it takes for environmental reviews to get through, not even just nuclear reactors, but like building and all sorts of different infrastructure, I think is really hampering us. And so I think it's definitely a good start. And like, obviously we'll have to figure it out. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it's an exciting place to start.
I just think we need to translate for people that are scared on the nuclear power side, just because, like, I mean, the 3 of us work next to a nuclear reactor for months at a time, and like, and then we know where there could be problems, and if there's problems, they're small problems, especially affecting the environment. Like, I mean, the water, and some of these aren't even going to be water cooled; they're going to be something else cooled, and like, so your water sources aren't even going to be affected. So I don't know. Like, I think I need to get heavier on how to help explain it, because in general, it's not the risk that everybody thinks it is. So,
No, and I think you look at the chart, it's like I wish more people knew about it, but like the deaths per different energy sources, and nuclear is like the lowest, like 0.04 per 100,000 versus like coal, which is like insane, biofuels, insane, and even solar and wind was pretty high. And then if you look sometimes at maybe some of the tailwinds of like the solar and wind movement of like kind of the carbon offset, the carbon cost that it takes to build everything, and like the animals it sometimes damages, and like the lithium we need to use, and like the other rare minerals in solar, it's actually not as environmentally friendly as you're saying, and kind of twist it so that I think Diablo Canyon is doing a pretty good job. Like they go right into the Pacific Ocean right there, and they have all these beautiful pictures of like fish and all these animals like right around there. I think like kind of doing that, but it has to be like a PR game, like you're saying, Mike. It needs to be like
On the PR thing, I mean, the NRC and really every nuclear company that has been around for a while is always saying things like you have to engage with the local community early and often. And that can, that doesn't just mean going to town meetings and discussing and educating, but it's also creating content like Diablo Canyon. I mean, I went to college right there in San Luis Obispo. It's an utterly beautiful coastline. So when I put out videos and pictures, it starts to retrain your mind about what you see. But
It reminds me of the video that it was a oil and gas company that put out or no, I guess it was Dove, like cleaning up the baby chick with Dove soap that had been like.
yeah, was that Valdez? Yeah, the Valdez are also there.
yeah.
if we only had a really good PR person that we knew that could help with all this PR. That's what my wife does. Yeah,
Okay.
she's a PR assassin. So
Very good. Amazing. We need it.
Yeah, speaking of PR assassins, I heard there was a Twitter spat this week. I cannot believe people are fighting on Twitter.
Isaiah Taylor is the founder of Valar Atomics. I could be mispronouncing it. They're
I think they call it Valor Atomics.
Valar. Thank you, Valar. His grandfather worked on Manhattan Project. His company is building microreactors like 100 kilowatts, and they're supposed to run for a month. And he put out a calculation saying, hey, you can handle my spent fuel with your bare hands and you'll be fine. It's less than a CAT scan. And then a couple of engineers were like, hang on, I'm going to do my own calculations. And someone, Gavin Ridley, he actually works at Olo Atomics, says, well, I did the calculation and you would die in less than 1/10 of a second. And so I just raise this up as like, it's a good example of sort of learning in the open and having discussions in the open, but it's also an indicator of like, look, there's going to be some really interesting technology coming out, very small micro reactors. And I don't know if the calculations are correct or not, but we're going to get this stuff to be like safer and safer and safer, not because of protections around it, but because of just the physics involved in these systems.
Wow.
okay, what's the for the viewers at home? What do we define as a micro reactor? Yair, you might be close enough to like. Do you have a threshold that you say is a micro versus?
Yeah, we usually use like around 1 megawatt electric or less generally. So 1.5. Like Radiant is a good example that's doing micro reactors. They're an El Segundo based company. They're building it for like remote bases. And then there's also a couple of companies that are building them for like the moon, for example, as well. We call that usually micro reactor. And we have like the SMR, small modular reactor. We call anywhere from like there to about 300 megawatts.
Did you say Altoona, Iowa?
No, I was talking about El Segundo in Valor is that as well. It's a pretty cool hub. We have a lot of portfolio companies there. Just like a lot of the SpaceX was there, and then the old days of like the Boeing Raytheon and like the 60s, 70s, where a lot of the really, really cool technology was being built, and like those families had kids, and they're all like very, very cracked engineers that are building on some pretty cool companies out there. Well, thank you guys again for having me on. Very excited to be here. I'm kind of a unique background. I was actually born in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. My parents are Dutch. My mom was born in Indonesia, immigrated to the Netherlands, where she met my dad. They met at University Medical School. And we got very lucky, grew up there. All my family still lives there, grew up speaking Dutch and French.
What kind of doctors are they?
My dad's an ophthalmologist and my mom's a psychiatrist.
Okay, nice.
So my mom just retired actually since I had the kids. So she's actually at home right now helping out with everything, which is very nice. Yeah.
New Graham?
Yeah, new grandma. Very excited to have her help.
He's gonna come teach some French and Dutch. And boy, you might be him.
Yeah, a little bit of Dutch, a little bit of Dutch. And my wife she was born in Moscow, Russia, immigrated here when she was about 10 years old. So
Oh my God.
yeah. Yeah, and I immigrated here when I was in 2003. My dad got a job at the University of Iowa, which is kind of a super random place, but as an ophthalmologist, grew up in the States, and basically, short story, my grandparents had to go on hiding in the Holocaust. They were Jews in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. And we kind of did a World War II tour when I was very young and kind of saw like a bunch of Holocaust sites, D-Day, a lot of different things. And I just always wanted to serve. And I came to the States and I didn't really know anything about different colleges and kind of how that system worked since my parents didn't. And they don't teach you sometimes the greatest things at Iowa high schools. And so tried to enlist for a little bit and got very lucky. I was kind of sent on the officer route and decided to go to the Naval Academy. I really just liked the uniforms. I thought they were super cool. And I grew up sailing a lot. And I was like, I want to go to the Naval Academy. It was like the only school I applied to, got in, and then went there. And then, I learned a lot. And then what's actually funny is both my brothers went to the Air Force Academy because I called them and was like, you should probably join the Air Force.
Go over there.
Yeah, it was way better. There's no deployments.
That's a good.
It's just easier. It's easy.
Yeah, it's way easier. There's no debate. They'll tell you it's way easier over here. And like you can make fun of them, but they're like, okay, you can make fun of me, but you can call me at home when you do it because I'm gonna be home. Oh,
Send me an email. I'll go in 3 weeks. Yeah.
that's fair. And there's some pretty cool bases. And then went to Naval Academy. Was a computer science undergrad. Had a lot of fun there. Was a Bowman Scholar, so early selected submarines, and then was selected to go to graduate school, which I actually passed on to go right into the fleet. I was a little bit tired of school after so many years. And then I really went subs. I didn't really know any better. They give you what's called a nuclear accession bonus. And so they give you a bonus, which I think was like $12,000, maybe $15,000 at the time. But to a college kid from Iowa, that's a lot of money. And so that was all it took. One little bonus. And they had me hook, line, and sinker, went down to Charleston for nuclear power school, and then moved around a bunch. I met my wife at ring dance at the Naval Academy. She was all of all my academy roommates are Navy SEALs now, and one of them went to high school with her when she immigrated to the Bay Area. So that's how we met, got introduced, which was very nice, and then moved around a bunch, and I was on the USS Pennsylvania, which is a ballistic missile submarine out of Washington State. I was there, did 3 strategic deterrent patrols, and finished kind of serving as engineer on board we ended up in the shipyard, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, for the last year, which was a very, very long year. We can kind of get into how the shipyards are so broken and kind of maybe some of these new executive orders that came out yesterday about building the Defense Industrial Base, as well as some of the maritime shipyard executive orders.
Yeah. You have to teach us about them. I didn't.
Yeah, they're very exciting. There's a lot. We'll see kind of what's real, what's not. But the new Secretary of the Navy, I've actually met him a couple times, so excited about some of the things that's going on there. And then decided I want to get out of the Navy. I really liked being on the submarine. I thought it was a very cool mission, like being in charge. As you guys know, being a 25-year-old in charge of a bunch of like high school dropouts, running a nuclear reactor in the middle of the Pacific Ocean is very, very cool. With like all these ballistic missiles. I was actually on board when we were the alert boat when Russia invaded Ukraine, which was pretty crazy. So we got extended out like super, super long. Yeah, I didn't even know who won like the Rams-Bengals Super Bowl until like I think May of that year. Missed like the Will Smith Oscar slap and everything. And it's a pretty stressful time because, as you guys know, there's no Wall Street Journal article or New York Times op-ed to tell you, hey, this is what it means. This is what's happening. You're only getting official message traffic. And it was a pretty scary time, but very exciting and like really chasing down the mission. And that was a very exciting time for me. I decided to get out because I was very frustrated, not with the people on board, but with our lack of technology and our lack of resources. Twofold, both the nuclear side and some of the military side. Kind of this idea of like, why is the best computer vision on my phone, on my Snapchat app? Like, why is that? It's incredible computer vision for me to make a dog filter on my face. And like, I'm looking through a periscope and I don't have great computer vision and I don't have really cool technology on my submarine. We're still using floppy disks with paper logs in the reactor. And it was a little frustrating, like in preparation for some of these great power conflicts, that we need like the best and smartest and brightest kids to work on the hardest problems, which I think have kind of shifted toward defense. And I'm very glad that there's kind of been a shift in that area, but I really wanted to kind of bring some of that along and kind of bring some changes. And I was too worried that if I stay in the Navy, it's going to take for me to be a 3-star admiral to make changes and to kind of meet with people. I would bring up issues as a young lieutenant, and like nobody really wants to listen to what a young lieutenant has to say. And now that I'm out of the Navy, a year later, everyone wants to listen to what I have to say. Right? It's open letters. I can say what I want, which is pretty funny to me, but
Yep. Yeah, it shouldn't be that way, but I think you're right.
Yeah, that's kind of the way. I just knew I was 20 years away from making a difference, and I was like, I don't have 20 years to wait. I have to make a difference today. And so, wanted to get out to do that. And then from the nuclear side, I was very interested in investing in nuclear companies because, as you guys know, we were operating a reactor. My reactor was built in 1989. Or that's when my ship was commissioned. So it was built in the 80s, probably designed in the 60s, 70s. Like all the engineers, pen and paper designed a reactor that we could operate perfectly. 40 years later, with a bunch of high school dropouts, one sleep deprived 25-year-old. And that was just like so incredible to me. And like when you explain it to people, they don't even believe you. Like the people in Seattle don't know that there's 20 nuclear reactors operating right next to, like 15 miles away from them. They don't believe it. And you hear stories like people would pull into ports and they would like the port would be down, like there'd be a protest and they would just like come in and like plug in and like power up the port and just show it kind of, I just knew we were missing something, like kind of this energy abundance unlock. It's like, we need to go back to nuclear. And so that was kind of a perfect twofold thing in defense and nuclear for me to make a transition to venture capital. And
Might be PC.
yeah, it was.
Yeah. How'd you find out what is AVC?
Yeah, AVC is a venture capital firm. We're based in San Francisco and Austin, Texas. I'm in Austin, Texas. It was founded by a man by the name of Joe Lonsdale. He founded Palantir back in the day with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is part of kind of the original PayPal mafia, one of Elon Musk's very close friend, and has founded like a bunch of companies. They founded Palantir out of their Stanford dorm room with my direct boss, Alex Moore, who runs the defense team in AVC. And he basically founded Palantir, and then he started another company called Adapar, which is wealth management. And he started another company called OpenGov, and he basically had 5 or 6 unicorns or billion-dollar companies. And he started a fund called AVC. It was originally called Formation 8, and this was named after the treacherous eights, which is basically 8 of the people that started Fairchild Semiconductor. I hope I'm getting the story correct, but kind of the original Silicon Valley, like the semiconductor material. If you look on kind of the periodic table of elements, silicon's in the middle. It can act as both like a resistor and a conductor, and that was kind of the key unlock in changing how we do everything in kind of electro engineering. And they started like in the 60s and 70s, Silicon Valley, and a lot of it was like DARPA research and working on the really cool missile systems that we have now, and working on like the really cool radar and like communications and like nuclear technologies, everything. That's kind of what started Silicon Valley. It's like a defense first place, just like the first computer from Oakland to Stanford from Berkeley was a DARPA project as well. Like I think defense really drove a lot of the innovation, and it was really sad to me when Project Maven or a big AI project got canceled by Google, and kind of this runaway from Silicon Valley from defense and kind of wanting to bring that back. And so Joe kind of wanted to bring that back, kind of use some of those Palantir roots. Palantir makes spy software for the government. This was like way before defense tech was cool, and like they got protested from campus, like nobody wanted to work with them. It was really hard for them to raise capital. And now the fund did very well. We were like the first check in Angel, which is another big defense tech company founded by Palmer Luckey. We incubated a company called Saronic, which does maritime autonomous boats. And so that was kind of an idea that the Navy, we're building these big ships, but we're building them very slowly, not fast enough at all. And maybe we can build them like with autonomy and like use some of the people ex SpaceX, ex Tesla to like manufacture a bunch of these boats, since it's hard to build a bit, and kind of using like a distributed network. We built that company. Now it's at a $4 billion valuation after just 2 years, which is pretty incredible.
Wow.
And so we're at a $8 billion assets under management, and we invest mainly in seed and Series A. So usually like the second or third check into a company, kind of a bunch of different verticals. So like defense, logistics, healthcare, biotech, and like software/AI.
Are you the only veteran or the main veteran that can like translate, or does anybody else have a background in military stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do a really cool program. This is classic Air Force called the like a EWI, Education with Industry. So we actually have an Air Force fellow that every year comes with us, who's a contracting officer, like a PEO, kind of speaks that language of acquisitions, all that stuff. We bring them in for a year while they're in the Air Force. They get to work for AVC and have like a super chill life that we can never even imagine on submarines. So we bring them in for some of the acquisitions, like knowledge. But I do think as a veteran, I try and bring a lot of that knowledge to the team, and then especially from the nuclear side as well. But I think I was the first veteran
in nuclear. Like, how'd you get in nuclear, and like, what are some of the investments that y'all have, and what do you guys like to see in nuclear?
Yeah, nuclear, that's a great question. The nuclear investing process actually started with Formation 8, that the venture capital firm before kind of ABC that molded into it. They invested in Oklo way back in the day, actually. And so, which was one of like the newest nuclear technology startups, which I think is really cool. I think they just had an announcement today. They won one of the microreactor competitions from, or maybe one of the SMR competitions from the DoD, or at least one of the 5 selectees, which is very cool.
Is that they got the Haley fuel? Is that
no? No, they got a different one. There's this project that started by DIU. have a couple friends on the board there where they're trying to figure out a way to power remote bases. So you're thinking like Taiwan only has like 14 days of diesel fuel left. China's probably going to like surround them and do an embargo. You need them, and they don't have enough oil to last themselves, and their batteries aren't going to last long enough, nor the generators. Can you maybe put reactors there? Can you put reactors in like the Arctic? And I think preparations for like the moon and Mars, and as crazy as that gets, maybe Alaska, some remote bases, but like the North Arctic as well, just as we start to like expand the outreach a little bit.
You said
Um,
DIU. What does DIU mean?
Oh, that's a great question. DIU is the Defense Innovation Unit. So this was started up kind of when they saw similar things that I saw, which was like this. They wanted to marry Silicon Valley and defense technology, and so it's called the Defense Innovation Unit. They're out of Mountain View, California, so near the Silicon Valley area, and they just got $1 billion of funding last year. And their goal is to kind of figure out ways to get acquisitions and appropriations dollars to interesting startups, and they put out like proposals and things. One of them, the big one, is the replicator program that Saronic is a part of, which the replicator was just like build a bunch of drones to kind of do a bunch of cool different things. And so that's their purpose, and they do have some nuclear initiatives as well. Yeah, but in terms of our nuclear investing, I think I just got really like from the pipeline, from being a nuclear submarine officer, I was very excited to invest in nuclear. And a lot of venture capitalists, I think, don't really know exactly, like, haven't operated nuclear reactors. So I think I kind of brought a unique perspective and kind of a subject matter expert versus like if you read the news, you're like, oh my God, we're a day away from fusion. I think we're not a day away from fusion. I think we're like at least 10 years away from commercial fusion, if ever. And like a lot of these ideas are very hype, kind of like asteroid mining or some of these crazy ideas, which I think are very exciting. But at AVC, we like to kind of put big checks in Series A, Series B companies and really invest in like real ideas. And so bringing some of those nuclear ideas. So we've done 2 investments. One of them is called Alva Energy. And what Alva Energy does is that they take existing reactors and they do what's called power uprates. So under 12% of an uprate of a reactor. So if you have like a nuclear reactor that can make 100 megawatts of energy, usually, again, these reactors were built in the 70s and 80s and maybe the 90s because we haven't built reactors since then. And they're usually like pretty archaic, similar to the submarines, which is like they have like paper or sometimes like very old screens, like analog, and you can upgrade them, sometimes do software upgrades, sometimes do upgrade some of the pumps or steam generators or other components, and you can basically increase the output. And with that increased output, that's like, it sounds like a small amount, 10 to 12%, maybe 15% output, but out of hundreds of megawatts on the grid. And if you think about it, the DOE recently came out with a liftoff report of like the quickest way to add megawatts and gigawatts to the grid today is not by building new nuclear, which is also super important we need to do, but here it's like a quicker way to get megawatts and gigawatts on the grid, which is upgrading these reactors and just like software upgrades, small pump upgrades, do it while they're refueling so they're shut down anyway, and just quickly get more energy on the grid. I think that's a very exciting company.
Okay. So
Or sorry, Rob.
yeah, they do uprates with, are they just getting rid of some engineering kind of buffers?
Yeah, a little bit. I think,
or something.
yeah, a little bit of both. It's like you can get rid of the margin. You can also, like these steam generators, some of them are like 25 years old. You can just like put a bigger steam generator in there. And like the margin to safety was already like established. You can literally just get like more steam out of the reactor, which was a pretty unique idea. And then they're using that. It's a really smart CEO, James. I think you guys should have him on. He's very, very smart. But basically the idea is like you start there, learn the engineering, learn how to manage projects, start by using a little bit of capital and eventually use that to build large nuclear. Because I think one of the big things is, I think one of the big solutions is building large nuclear in America. I think it's just so challenging to do it because the costs are so high. And so you need to kind of get the muscle back of not just 60-year-olds that know how to do this, but kind of bring it back and like regrow that muscle, get a bunch of Navy nukes, get a bunch of engineers, concrete pours, everyone like learn how to do projects and manage again. And then we can kind of start to build large nuclear. So that's kind of their North Star is building large
I'm
nuclear.
imagining these places are just abandoned nuclear facilities. So help me.
Yeah, they're not. That's a great point. They're actually not abandoned. So they're still operating today. We have 93 operating reactors in America, and most of them have already done some of these small uprates. But a lot of them, like NextEra Energy, they did one of these uprates and it just went way over budget because they don't really have the tooling and the manning for it. And so the startup thinks, hey, if we can add some like innovation, a little AI, kind of young, smart, like hardworking kids, kind of like that kind of the Silicon Valley attitude of startup to that, if you walk into a nuclear reactor, it is all like, 50, 60-year-old like nuclear engineers, very smart people, but they kind of do their thing. And it's like, can you maybe change a little bit of the culture and change some of it and start to do these aggressive upgrades? And you can do them all over. But they are operating reactors. I do think there's an exciting other side to the coin, which we are not involved in right now, which is like restarting reactors. So as you know, Three Mile Island, one of their plants is restarting. Constellation's part of it. And then there's another one in Iowa, actually, which I am trying to be a part of. We'll see how it shakes out. But there was a plant in Iowa that shut down in 2020 because they wanted to build a solar farm in its place. So it's a 600 megawatt reactor that they turned into like a 150 megawatt solar farm. And like, that's pretty stupid. I think we can all agree, but that's what we were at the time in 2018, 2019. Maybe that has to do with that chart of sentiment, like peaking at the bottom, 2016, 2017, which drove those decisions, which is our energy was stagnant in America. We had offshored a lot of our manufacturing and our energy growth. If you look at it from like the 1940s, we were like manufacturing and then bringing electricity to every house, which didn't have it in the 40s. In the 50s and 60s, HVAC, and building all these factories and building cars and doing all these amazing things. And energy growth was really, really aggressive. Like we had probably like maybe anywhere from 3 to 7% energy growth year over year. And that really drove like Westinghouse, GE to be like two of the biggest companies in the world. It's like Edison's company versus Tesla's company. And they basically were just like growing bigger and bigger and bigger and acquiring all these things as like America was electrifying. They even owned, I think, like CNBC, Fox, like a lot of the media companies. And eventually, as that kind of plateaued in the 90s and 2000s, as we started offshoring manufacturing, every house got electrified, all the buildings were kind of built. We weren't building a ton of infrastructure. Electricity kind of just started to stagnate, and that caused these companies to kind of drop off. And you see that a little bit with Westinghouse, had to sell off like they've sold off hundreds of parts. For example, the Columbia class is the newest missile submarine that's like 6 years delayed because the steam turbines that Westinghouse used to build got bought off by Northrop Grumman for cents on the dollar with no experience. Now can't build steam turbines, and they might even like build a submarine, put it together, and have to like reopen it just to put like more nuclear components in it, such as the steam turbine, which is horrible. And it's like years delayed, and we can pay Deloitte $2 billion and a bunch of consultants like try and figure out the problem. But the root of it is like that muscle to like build things and build reactors and build hard projects are just like not really there. And so how do you kind of get that back? And I think restarting the Duane Arnold plant is a very exciting version of that, which is again 600 megawatts on the grid that we just like turned off to do a solar plant for like way less. And now it's like, wait a minute, we do need energy. And we're finally seeing energy growth start to really explode again, which I think is exciting.
What's the name of the company that you said is upgrading the
Alva Energy.
Alpha?
Alva, ALVA Energy. Yeah, would love to give them a shout out. James, CEO, super smart team based out of Boston, New York. We have another company called Deep Fission. We did a seed there as well, where they build small modular reactors in the ground. I think small modular reactors are very interesting, similar to Oklo. It's kind of that range, like we talked about, maybe 10 to 300 megawatts. It's kind of, can you build small reactors at scale? And I think I'm not super bullish on SMRs. I think we need to build really like the large nuclear fleet, but I think it's exciting, especially with like this deregulation. Maybe we can start to really print them out. I think the one concern is we talk a lot about capacity factor earlier, about how solar and wind are not always on. I think the concern for me is with SMRs, I think they're not always going to be on. I think they say we're going to have 90+% capacity factor, or time that we're on in like our lifetime, because our large nuclear fleet and our submarines are on like 95+% of the time. But the problem is it took a long time to get there. Like nuclear is actually very hard to design. We've just gotten very good at it because the 60s and 70s. And so like when you look at the numbers from the 50s and 60s, like our large nuclear fleet had nowhere near 90% capacity factor. Our submarines did not have 90% capacity factor. And today our submarines probably wouldn't. We just operate them not at like 100% every second of the day. And if we did, they probably wouldn't last as long as we want them to. And so I think my thesis is that it's going to take a lot longer than we think to get kind of that 90+, because as cool as these companies are that are coming out, and I'm very excited that kind of pushing the limits, a lot of this engineering has already been done in the 60s and 70s. Like we put a nuclear reactor in an airplane. We sent a nuclear reactor to space. We've done, in the 60s and 70s, we did some crazy ideas with reactors. And so it's not super novel actually. And so I think it's just like not doing some crazy technology, but can you execute? Can you get the financing? Can you get the funding? And can you just like mass manufacture? That's the big question. And I think I kind of have a thesis about, this is another kind of hot take, which not a lot of people in the nuclear part love, but I was in UAE, and they actually built 4 AP1400s. So 1400s is a 1400 megawatt reactor. So they're building large nuclear reactors out there. They obviously print money from the ground with oil, but they know it's not going to last forever, and they're trying to show that they're a modern nation. And maybe can you have them with all their money, and they don't really care if their budgets go over, because like their Neom City project where they're trying to host the Asian Winter Games in like 2028 and like build a lime city using like 30% of the world's steel. That's going to go over budget and it's going to get crazy. Like, why not use that instead of building some crazy futuristic city with flying cars? Build nuclear reactors, let American companies do it, regrow the muscle, bring our trained people out there, do it there, bring it back here. And I think that I'm glad that SMR companies, and I think there is a place for small modular reactors. I just don't really see a world, especially not with micro reactors, like every like town having a reactor, every house having a reactor. Like that's just a little bit tougher for me to buy off on than like getting it.
Because it's a race between the small and the large, and the large will get there faster because a lot of them have already been.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think the large, like we just know, like like the AP1000, it works. Like these large, like boiling water reactors, BWRs, and pressurized water reactors, PWRs. Like the technology works. The high capacity factors, we can just do it. Like we don't really know how anymore, but the technology is kind of proven. Whereas these SMRs, I have to be a lot more skeptical about the technology and like keeping it 100% power for years on end and providing power. And these data centers don't want, like they can't. It's an AI race as well, and they can't. Just like your reactor can't just turn off. Like you can't have all these like problems or delays manufacturing. Like the big kind of hyperscalers don't have time for any of that. So I think that's why the large wins. But I think they're both important, and it's kind of we're kind of pushing towards one goal. I think as well.
This is really refreshing. I want to wrap that up, Mike. Looking at a question, but like what you're saying is okay. There's to get there to meet demand. There's three big chunks. There's brand new reactors. That could be the ones we already built or novel technologies that haven't been built yet. There's power uprates, which is Duane Arnold's a restart.
And that is a restart.
And then there's restarts. Things have been shut down. Let's start them back on. And it's really interesting to hear the debate out there about like what's it actually going to take. And something that I hear over and over from the industry, from experienced people, is like the AP1000s of the world. We know how to build them, maybe not perfectly, but we built them in Georgia most recently.
Yeah,
they're being built all over China, Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is actually not building them yet. I swear this is like,
excuse me,
UAE. Yep.
Thank you, the UAE, and they put out a ton of power. A gigawatt is like big time. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think one of the scariest charts that I ever see come across, and maybe if one of you guys want to pull up on your screen, but it's who's building nuclear reactors, like who's building new nuclear reactors in 2025. It's like China, boom, huge, massive, Russia, big, and then all these other countries, and then which reactors are they building? And they're not building American reactors. They're either building Chinese or Russian reactors. And so we are like massively losing that race, and especially as like we have energy just demand as we want to like everyone drive an electric car by 2030. Like the grid today cannot support that. Like it just like mathematically does not work.
You can pull up that chart on Nukes of Hazard. We don't like to see that.
Yeah, you're right. It's not good. It's scary. It should scare. Like it should be like at the beginning of like every NRC like morning meeting should be like, hey, how do we get us there? Like how do we get to like actually building new nuclear? Because it's an energy race now, which is obviously downstream of the AI race.
Yair Abramoff, thank you. Hot takes on hot takes. Just dropping all kinds of knowledge on this. This was really an insightful discussion. I think our listeners are going to learn so much from this. So really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us at Nukes of Hazard. Maybe we could put some notes and links in the show notes just so
I would love to
access some of this terrific information. So I think that's all we've got for today on Nukes of Hazard. So thanks everybody for tuning in.